I noticed another car parked down the street. A sleek black sedan I'd never seen before. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it belonged to a neighbor. But as I walked up to the house, something felt off. The curtains in the living room were drawn, which Lisa never does during the day, and the front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, calling her name. "Lisa, I'm home." No response. That's when I heard it. Muffled voices coming from upstairs. My heart started racing. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she had a friend over. Maybe she was on the phone. But as I climbed the stairs, the voices got clearer. One of them was Lisa's. The other was a man's. I reached our bedroom door and froze. It was slightly ajar, and through the crack I saw them. Lisa, my wife, on our bed, with another man. I didn't burst in. I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. She was laughing, running her hand down his chest. And then she said something that made my stomach churn. "Don't worry," she said. "He's too busy with work to notice anything." Too busy with work? Was that her excuse? I backed away, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Leave? Call someone? I ended up leaving, driving aimlessly for hours. When I finally came back, the black sedan was gone. Lisa was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. "Hey, you're home early," she said, flashing me a smile. "How was the trip?" I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I'd seen upstairs just hours earlier. "Fine," I said tightly. "Tiring." She nodded sympathetically. "Well, I'm making your favorite for dinner. Thought you deserved a treat after all the traveling you've been doing." The audacity. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Was this a one-time thing? Had it been going on for weeks? Months? Years? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. The next day, while Lisa was at work, I started digging. First, I went through her phone. She'd recently changed her passcode, which was suspicious in itself, but I managed to guess it after a few tries. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were messages from an unsaved number. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. He's gone this weekend. Come over." My hands shook as I scrolled through them. Then I found photos. Of her. In lingerie I'd never seen before. It got worse. The texts weren't just from one man. There were others. My stomach turned as I pieced it together. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was working as an escort. I found an email confirmation for a client appointment and a hidden folder on her laptop filled with receipts for hotels, lingerie, and even protection. I wanted to throw up. That evening, Lisa came home, smiling as she kissed me on the cheek. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy," I said, forcing a smile. Inside, I was raging. Over the next few days, I gathered more evidence. I followed her once when she said she was going to a yoga class. She drove to a hotel instead. I watched her meet a man in the lobby, her face lighting up as she hugged him. By the time she came home that night, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to expose her. I couldn't stop thinking about that night. The black sedan, the voices upstairs, the texts, the photos. Every time I looked at Lisa, my stomach churned. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was a stranger. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. I still kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I still helped the kids with their homework. But inside, I was falling apart. The private investigator I hired was thorough. Within days, he handed me a file that made my blood run cold. There were more hotel receipts, photos of Lisa meeting different men, and even a profile on an escort website. She went by the name Sophia. The tagline read, "Classy, discreet, unforgettable." It felt like a punch to the gut. How long had she been doing this? Why? The investigator confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't new. Lisa had been working as an escort for at least a year. Her schedule was carefully crafted to avoid suspicion. She'd tell me she was going to yoga, a book club, or even a parent-teacher meeting. And I believed her. Every single time. The worst part was seeing the photos. Lisa, dressed to the nines, smiling and laughing with men I'd never seen before. Some of them were old enough to be her father. Others looked like frat boys. It was like looking at someone I didn't recognize. That night, I confronted her, sort of. I didn't show my hand yet, but I asked her some pointed questions. "So, how's yoga going?" I asked casually as we sat down for dinner. She smiled. Great. Why? No reason, I said, shrugging. Just curious. You've been going a lot lately. She hesitated for a split second before replying. Well, you know how stressful work's been, she said. It helps me unwind. Work. Another lie. The PI's report included her work schedule. She wasn't a graphic designer like she claimed. Her business trips were escort gigs. A week later, I decided to follow her again. She'd told me she was meeting a friend for coffee. Instead, she drove to a private house on the other side of town. The PI had already scoped it out. It belonged to a man named Victor, a regular client. I parked down the street and watched as she walked up to the front door, her hair perfectly styled, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She rang the bell, and a man answered. Tall, well-dressed, and probably in his late 50s. They hugged. She laughed. And then they disappeared inside. I clenched the steering wheel, my chest tight with anger. Part of me wanted to barge in and confront them, but I didn't. I stayed put, watching the house for hours until she finally came out. When she got home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for putting the kids to bed, and even suggested we watch a movie together. The audacity. Over the next few weeks, the lies kept piling up. Lisa was meeting more clients, making more excuses, and spending more money. I checked our bank account and saw thousands of dollars missing, money I'd worked hard to save. Then came the first twist. The PI called me one afternoon. James, he said, his voice tense. You need to see this. He sent me a video. It was Lisa, but not with a client. She was sitting in a cafe with someone I recognized immediately. Her sister, Claire. At first, I thought they were just catching up, but then Claire handed Lisa an envelope, and Lisa smiled. When I zoomed in, I saw what was inside. Cash. My stomach dropped. Claire wasn't just her sister. She was her accomplice. Finding out Claire was involved changed everything. Claire wasn't just Lisa's sister. She was someone I trusted. She'd babysat our kids, spent holidays with us, and even helped me plan Lisa's last birthday party. Now I realized she wasn't just complicit. She was an active part of this web of lies. The private investigator confirmed my suspicions. Claire handles the finances, he said. She manages Lisa's appointments, collects payments, and even screens new clients. My stomach churned as he explained the setup. They're running this like a business, he said. A business. That's what my marriage had been reduced to. A cover for their twisted operation. The PI showed me more photos and messages, including texts between Lisa and Claire. Claire, Victor said he wants to book you for the weekend. Should I confirm? Lisa, of course. Tell him I'll meet him at the usual place. It wasn't just about the money. They were laughing behind my back, mocking me in their messages. Lisa, James has no clue. He actually believes I'm at yoga right now. Faced with tears of joy. Claire, you've got him wrapped around your finger. Keep it up. Reading those texts felt like another betrayal. Lisa was lying to me, cheating on me, and dragging her sister into it. That weekend, I decided to confront Claire. She came over for dinner, as she often did, acting like everything was normal. She hugged the kids, complimented Lisa's cooking, and even joked about how tired I looked. After dinner, I asked her to step outside. Can we talk? I said, keeping my tone casual. Sure, she said, following me onto the porch. I didn't waste any time. How long have you been helping Lisa? I asked, my voice cold. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the texts. Her face went pale. James, I can explain. Don't. I snapped, cutting her off. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want the truth. She hesitated, then sighed. Fine, she said. Yes, I've been helping her. But it's not what you think. What is it then? I asked bitterly. Because it looks like you've been helping my wife cheat on me and steal from me. She needed the money, Claire said defensively. She was drowning in debt, and she didn't want to burden you. So she decided to become an escort? I said incredulously. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Claire said. It started with one client, just to cover her credit card bills. But then it snowballed. I stared at her, my anger bubbling over. And you thought this was okay? I demanded. You thought it was fine to lie to me, to help her destroy our marriage? She didn't want to lose you, Claire said softly. She thought she could keep it separate. I laughed bitterly. Separate? She's cheating on me, Claire. She's lying to me every single day. How is that separate? Claire didn't have an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa and Claire laughing, counting their money, and mocking me behind my back. The next morning, I confronted Lisa again. Why didn't you tell me about Claire? I asked, holding up my phone. Her eyes widened as she saw the messages. Where did you get those? She asked. That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that you've been lying to me, and you dragged your sister into it. Lisa crossed her arms, her expression defiant. I had no choice, she said. Claire offered to help, and I needed her. You needed her to cover your lies? I said, my voice rising. To help you cheat on me? I didn't plan for this to happen, she said. It just did. I shook my head, my chest tight with anger. I trusted you, I said. I trusted both of you, and you've destroyed everything. Lisa didn't respond. The PI called me later that day with another bombshell. James, there's something else you need to know, he said. What now? I asked, bracing myself. There's a third person involved, he said. Not a client. Someone else. The phone call from the PI left me reeling. There's a third person involved, he'd said. Not a client. Someone else. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me again. Who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The PI hesitated. It's someone you know. Someone close. I gripped the phone tightly, my chest tight with dread. Just tell me, I said, my voice trembling. It's Tom, he said finally. Tom, my best friend. The guy who'd been my best man at our wedding. The guy who'd coached our son's little league team last summer. The guy who'd sat at my dining room table, drinking my beer and laughing with my kids. No, I said, shaking my head. That's not possible. I'm sorry, the PI said. But I've got photos, texts, everything. He's been helping Lisa behind your back. Helping her. That word felt like a knife in my gut. The PI sent me a file later that day, and I sat in my car, scrolling through it with shaking hands. There were photos of Lisa and Tom meeting at a coffee shop, laughing like old friends. Photos of them standing too close, their heads bent together in conversation. And then there were the texts. Lisa, thanks for covering for me. James can't know about this. Tom, don't worry. He'll never find out. Tom wasn't just covering for her. He was involved in her business. That night, I called him. Hey, man, I said, forcing a casual tone. You free to grab a drink? Sure, he said. What's up? Just need to talk, I said. We met at a local bar, the same one we'd been going to for years. Tom greeted me with a smile, clapping me on the shoulder. How's it going, he asked. Not great, I said, sitting down across from him. I waited until we'd both ordered drinks before I spoke again. I know about Lisa, I said, watching his reaction closely. His smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. What do you mean? He asked, feigning confusion. I mean, I know about the escort business, I said, and I know you're involved. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally. Don't lie to me, Tom, I said, my voice rising. I've got the texts, the photos, everything. Just admit it. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, he said. Yes, I've been helping her. But it's not what you think. What is it then? I asked bitterly. Because it looks like you've been helping my wife destroy my life. She came to me for help, he said. She said she was in trouble, that she needed money. I didn't know what she was doing at first. And when you found out, I demanded. I thought I could control it, he said. Keep her safe, make sure she didn't get hurt. I laughed bitterly. Keep her safe? She's been lying to me for over a year, Tom. She's been cheating on me, stealing from me, and dragging you and Claire into it. How the hell is that safe? He didn't have an answer. I left the bar without finishing my drink. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. When I got home, Lisa was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. How was the bar? She asked casually. Enlightening, I said coldly. She looked up, her smile fading as she saw my expression. What's wrong? She asked. I talked to Tom, I said, crossing my arms. Her face went pale. James, I can explain. Don't. I snapped, cutting her off. I've heard enough lies for one lifetime. I turned and walked upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind me. The next day, I called the lawyer again. It's time, I said. By the time I got off the phone with the lawyer, the wheels were in motion. Everything had led to this moment. Lisa's lies, Claire's betrayal, and Tom's involvement. They thought they had me fooled. They thought they could keep this hidden forever. But they were wrong. The lawyer was clear. Timing was everything. We need to gather everything, he said. Bank statements, text messages, photos, anything that proves her infidelity and misuse of marital assets. Once we file, the court will favor you, especially with the evidence you've collected. I spent the next few days preparing. Every receipt, every suspicious charge, every incriminating message, organized and labeled. The private investigator handed over his final report, a damning collection of photos, emails, and surveillance logs. Then came the hardest part, preparing the kids. I didn't want to drag them into this, but I also didn't want Lisa to twist the narrative. Can we talk? I asked them one evening after dinner. Emily, our 15-year-old, looked up from her phone. What's up? Michael, our 10-year-old, was still focused on his homework. I took a deep breath. Your mom and I are having some issues, I said carefully, and we've decided to separate. Emily's eyes widened. Are you getting a divorce? She asked bluntly. Michael looked up, confused. Why? It's complicated, I said, keeping my tone calm. But I want you both to know that we love you very much. This isn't your fault. Emily crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. Is this because of her? She asked, glancing toward the living room where Lisa was scrolling through her phone. I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. Later that night, Emily knocked on my bedroom door. Dad, she said softly. Come in, I said, sitting up. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. I know something's been going on, she said. Mom's been acting weird for months. What do you mean? I asked, my chest tightening. She's always on her phone, Emily said. And she gets all jumpy when I walk in the room. I thought maybe she was just stressed, but she trailed off, her expression troubled. I reached out and squeezed her hand. It's going to be okay, I said. I promise. The next day, I met with the lawyer again. We're ready to file, he said. I nodded, my mind racing. That evening, Lisa came home, her demeanor as carefree as ever. Hey, she said, kissing me on the cheek. How was your day? Fine, I said shortly. She frowned. Is everything okay? Why wouldn't it be? I asked, my tone cold. She didn't press the issue. Instead, she went upstairs to shower, which I now knew was code for calling one of her clients or accomplices. The private investigator had confirmed that she had another appointment that weekend. She was meeting Victor, the regular client, at a hotel downtown. I decided that would be the moment. On Saturday, Lisa left the house around 5 p.m., claiming she was meeting Claire for dinner. I waited 20 minutes, then grabbed my bag and headed out. The private investigator was already at the hotel when I arrived. She's in room 408, he said, handing me a key card. I pulled some strings to get you access. My heart pounded as I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, listening to the muffled voices inside. Then I swiped the key card and pushed the door open. The scene inside was exactly what I expected. Lisa was sitting on the bed, laughing with Victor. She froze when she saw me, her face draining of color. James, she stammered, standing up. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I repeated, my voice cold. What the hell are you doing here, Lisa? Victor looked between us, his expression confused. Who's this? He asked. Her husband, I said sharply. Lisa's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Care to explain what's going on? I asked, holding the camera steady. James, please, she said, her voice trembling. Let's talk about this at home. No, I said. We're doing this right here, right now. Victor stood up, raising his hands. Look, I didn't know she was married, he said. I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, I said, glaring at him. I turned back to Lisa, my chest tight with anger. This is it, I said. We're done. I've filed for divorce, and I've got all the evidence I need to make sure you don't get a dime. Her face crumpled, and she started to cry. James, please, she sobbed. I can explain. No, I said, cutting her off. You've done enough lying. It's over. I walked out without another word, leaving her and Victor standing there in stunned silence. The confrontation at the hotel was just the beginning of the end. I left Lisa standing there with Victor, her lies exposed, and her double life unraveling in real time. The adrenaline carried me through the drive home, but by the time I pulled into the driveway, the weight of it all hit me like a freight train. I just ended an 18-year marriage. The next morning, Lisa didn't come home. She texted me once around noon. "We need to talk. Please, James, for the kids." I didn't respond. I'd made my decision, and there was no going back. That afternoon, the lawyer filed the divorce papers. He assured me that with the evidence I had, her infidelity, her misuse of our finances, her lies, I had a strong case for sole custody of the kids and a favorable division of assets. Still, it didn't feel like a victory. The hardest part was telling the kids. I sat them down in the living room, my hands trembling slightly. "Your mom and I are getting a divorce," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. Emily folded her arms, her jaw tight. "Because she cheated?" she asked bluntly. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Michael, our youngest, looked confused. "What does that mean?" he asked. "Is Mom leaving?" "For now, yes," I said. "But we'll figure out a way to make sure you still see her." Emily stood up, her face red with anger. "I don't want to see her," she said. "She lied to all of us." Her words cut deeper than I expected, but I couldn't argue with her feelings. Over the next few days, Lisa texted and called repeatedly, begging for a meeting. Eventually, I agreed to sit down with her, mainly to discuss logistics for the kids. We met at a coffee shop. Lisa looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy. "James," she said, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I pulled my hand back, my jaw tightening. "You didn't just hurt me," I said. "You hurt the kids. You lied to all of us. And for what? Money? Attention?" She started to cry, but I didn't feel any sympathy. "I made mistakes," she said. "But I love you, and I love our family. Can't we try to fix this?" "No," I said firmly. "It's too late for that." The lawyer had warned me that Lisa might try to manipulate me, and he was right. Over the next week, she swung between begging for forgiveness and trying to justify her actions. One day she said, "I did it for us, James. The money I made was for our family." Another day, she snapped, "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." Her excuses only solidified my resolve. I focused on the kids, making sure they felt loved and supported during the chaos. Emily refused to speak to Lisa, and Michael asked constant questions about when things would go back to normal. "I don't know, buddy," I told him honestly, "but we're going to be okay." The private investigator handed me one last bombshell before I closed the case. Lisa wasn't just working with Claire and Tom. She'd been funneling money into a secret offshore account. Nearly $75,000 was missing from our joint account, along with another $20,000 from the kids' college funds. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even deny it. "I needed a safety net," she said defensively. "A safety net for what?" I snapped. "Running off with Victor? Or was it Ryan? Or Tom?" Her silence was deafening. The court proceedings were brutal, but in the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I was granted full custody of the kids, and Lisa was ordered to pay back the money she'd stolen. She was also barred from accessing any future assets until the debts were settled. The last time I saw her, she looked like a shadow of the woman I'd married. She tried one last time to plead her case. "I still love you, James," she said, tears streaming down her face. I looked at her, my chest tight with a mix of anger and pity. "I loved you too," I said. "But the person I loved doesn't exist anymore." It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized.